Vice Chair, could you give me a thumbs up if you can? Great. Good afternoon. We are on the record in case number 2020-00417, electronic application of Horus Kentucky 1 LLC for a certificate of construction for an approximately 69.3 megawatt merchant electric solar generating facility in Simpson County, Kentucky, pursuant to KRS 278-700 and 807 KAR 5110. My name is Kent Chandler. I'm chairman of the Kentucky Public Service Commission and also serve as chairman for the Kentucky State Board on Electric Generation and Transmission Siting. I will be presiding over the hearing today. Joining me via video conferencing are the other siting board members. The siting board members in this matter, in addition to myself, are Amy Cubbage, Vice Chair of the Kentucky Public Service Commission, Mary Ann Butler, Commissioner of the Public Service Commission, John Lyons, Deputy Secretary of the Energy and Environment Cabinet, serving as proxy for Secretary Rebecca Goodman, Charlie Rowland, Executive Advisor with Cabinet for Economic Development, serving as proxy for Interim Secretary Larry Hayes, Debbie Thornton, Simpson County Planning and Zoning Chair, first ad hoc appointee, and James Mooneyhan, second ad hoc appointee. At this time, I will caution attendees to please set your cellular phones to quiet or turn them off. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic in Kentucky, we are hosting this hearing via video conferencing. Since this continues to be a learning experience, there are a few suggestions and requirements I have. First, mute your microphone if you are not speaking. Attorneys, when interjecting, please state your name so that the video record is clear. If you use a phone for the audio and a computer for the video, turn off the computer audio, otherwise there will be feedback. If you are in a room with several people on their own computers, turn off the computer audio for all but one computer. If another participant is in a nearby office, please close the doors between offices. Please use wired headphones or wired earbuds instead of wireless. Keep a charger nearby in case your battery runs low. And finally, please alert the siting board if you are experiencing technology failure that prevents your participation at any time in the proceedings. Attorneys should contact staff at the previously provided contact information. The hearing today is for the purpose of taking evidence on Horus Kentucky 1 LLC's application requesting a certificate of construction for a 69.3 megawatt merchant electric generating solar facility to be located in Simpson County, Kentucky. At this time, we'll have the entry of appearance of counsel. Given the issues we have with conducting a video hearing, upon providing your entry of appearance, we also ask that you identify your witnesses at this time. For the applicant, Horus Kentucky 1 LLC.
Thank you, Chairman. Randy Saunders with Nelson Mullins. I also have with me today Braden Houston, Jorge Medina, Wu Smith, Charlie Hill, and Bill Coughlin. And Sadre.
And for the interveners.
Yes, sir. This is David Broderick from Bowling Green, Kentucky. My partner, Brady Murley, and we have witnesses today who are also the intervening parties, Steve Baldwin and John Pitt.
Okay. And for siting board staff.
Linda Gosnell.
And Nancy Vincent.
Thank you. So I've been advised, Mr. Saunders, and I checked it this morning or this afternoon, that notice of filing of this hearing, proof of notice of filing has been entered into the record. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And my understanding is there are 2 outstanding motions for confidentiality. Is that also correct?
That is correct, Chairman.
Okay. Is there a current agreement with the parties for access to that confidential information?
There is not.
Okay. I'm also aware over the weekend, or at least on Friday, there were a number of filings made. I guess there was a motion to limit the cross-examination, and there was a response to that motion. I believe, Mr. Broderick, that was filed on Friday as well. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. And Mr. Saunders, I'll give you an opportunity here for just a minute this morning if you'd like to reply to that response, since it is your motion.
Thank you, Chairman. As I'm sure this body is aware, there's pending litigation. There were 2 appeals filed based on the awarding of CDPs. And I apologize, I'm just getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah, can I ask Mr. Broderick, could you all mute your microphone just while Mr. Saunders, thank you.
I was saying, I'm sure this body's aware, there was 2 pending lawsuits filed regarding the issuance of a CUP and a second CUP in Simpson County. Based on the filings that were submitted by the intervener on Friday, it appears that the only anticipated testimony relates to that litigation. The first appeal for the first CUP has been dismissed and appealed. The second CUP, 2 of the 3 causes of action asserted have been dismissed. The lone cause of action that remains is an alleged injury based on the issuance of the second CUP, and that injury, as alleged, was a reduction in property value. Today, I know Rich Kirkland and I believe Ed Harvey's report both address those. What we don't see in the intervener's witness list is any evidence or any expert testimony that is planned as it relates specifically to the property value issue. You know, the purpose of this hearing today is for this board to fully be able to question Horus Kentucky 1 as it relates to their application for the certificate. We fear that these issues may go outside the scope of the purpose of this hearing. While I believe that the intervener should have an opportunity to speak at this hearing, obviously, I believe it's more appropriate that it would be what would be akin to the just public response. But ultimately, I leave it for the board. I just fear that we have as we try to get through this as quickly and as relevantly as possible, that we have a chance to drift down some paths and some issues, some tangential issues that are really unrelated to the purpose of this hearing today.
So I want to take the liberty to deny the motion from the bench on this issue, and I'll explain why, and I hope you can hear me, Mr. Broderick. I deny the motion, but I do so cautiously. So I'd like to note a couple of guardrails that we already have. First, certainly we didn't grant some sort of limited intervention to Mr. Pitt or Mr. Baldwin. The citing board granted them intervention as a party to this case. And so we have no intention to necessarily limit their ability as a party. With that being said, certainly 2 of the number of criteria that the citing board rules on in determining whether to approve these within 278-710 are 710-1A, the impact of the facility on scenic surroundings, property values, the pattern and type of development of adjacent property and surrounding roads, and then also 278-710-1E, whether the proposed facility will meet all local planning and zoning requirements that existed on the date the application was filed. It would appear to me that based on the filings made to date by Mr. Pitt and Mr. Baldwin, that those are at least subjects in which they intend to address through their direct examination. Intend to make, I guess, legal arguments on. Further, I just, to Mr. Broderick and his clients, I would just sort of note that when granted intervention in this matter, the citing board found that Mr. Pitt and Mr. Baldwin were likely to present issues and develop facts that will assist the citing board in fully considering the matter without unduly complicating or disrupting the proceedings. So with that caveat and understanding that one, I don't anticipate we'll be allowing cross-examination or direct examination beyond the scope of, for one, matters in which the citing board can take under consideration when granting or denying the application. But 2, certainly matters that would unduly complicate or disrupt the proceedings. So I would just caution Mr. Broderick as well as Mr. Sanders throughout this hearing to try to limit the scope of I guess, inquiry to only those items in which the citing board has authority to rule upon and make as a basis for its grant or denial in this matter. Do you have any questions, Mr. Saunders, Mr. Broderick?
I do not. Thank you, Chairman.
No, sir, thank you.
Okay. All right. I know that there's that outstanding motion. There's also the two outstanding motions for confidentiality. Before we get started, is there anything else that we need to take under advisement? All right. Hearing nothing, Mr. Saunders is the applicant. You may call your first witness.
Thank you. We're going to call as our first witness Braden Houston. And we previously provided with our witness list information regarding Mr. Houston. Mr. Houston is the Managing Director of Solar Development for OPD Energy. And I've got just a few foundation
All right.
questions.
Before that, Mr. Saunders, let me go ahead and swear Mr. Houston in.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Houston, please turn on your camera and your microphone and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Okay, please state your name and address for the record.
Braden Houston, 68 Chestnut Street, Newton, Mass. 02465.
Okay, Mr. Saunders, you may ask.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Braden. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Can you please tell this body your current job title?
I am the Managing Director of Solar Development, and that is my title.
And were you involved with the application or with the preparation of the application for this matter?
Correct, yes. Ultimately, I was the signatory to the document, and ultimately, I am the one in charge of preparing it, folks working with me to get that in, yes.
Okay. And as we've gone through this process, were you involved with the response to the data requests and the supplemental information that we provided to this body?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Prior to any questions that may be asked of you today, were there any corrections or clarifications that you wanted to make before we get started?
The only correction to the record would be just to make sure that there is, the chairman is aware that we have provided an additional layout that addressed all the issues related to the setbacks. There were four receptors, four houses that were at the time of the second submittal within 250 feet of the panels. We have since reshuffled the panels, and now everything should be in compliance. Everything, according to our engineering team, is within compliance.
Thank you. Now, can you describe your role in the development of this project?
Yes. I've been the developer on this project now for approximately a year and a half. I did not initially start the development of this project. Two other gentlemen who used to work for the company have since moved on, initially began the development of the project. I have since taken over the project. It is my responsibility as the lead developer in this project to make sure that we secure all of our permits, that we secure all of our interconnection applications, that we secure all of our environmental permits, that we take care of basically everything from the local, the state, and the federal governments to secure the project going forward, at which point we will get the project built. Once we have all the permissions, we will then go out and get that built.
Thank you. And because we are on video today, I wanted to ask and just let this body know, what materials do you have on hand in front of you today that you'll be able to review in responding to any questions or concerns that they may have?
Certainly. I have a copy of the review and evaluation of the Horus Kentucky 1 LLC site assessment report created by Harvey Economics. And then I have the different maps and things that are included in that report, as well as other documents that I can access on my computer.
Do you have available to you our original application?
I do. I have to pull that up, but yes, I can get that.
All right. And you've got the responses that we made to the data request and the supplemental request available?
Yes, I can pull those out.
Mr. Chairman, at this point, I would turn this witness over to the body for questioning.
Okay. Mr. Broderick, Mr. Murley, do you all have any cross-examination for Mr. Houston?
Not at this time, thank you, sir.
Okay. Ms. Gosnell, Ms. Vincel, any questions for Mr. Houston?
Yes, I'm Linda Gosnell, and I'm not clear on which of your witnesses will be able to testify on which particular subject matter. So I might just ask counsel if you could tell me the name so I can get my questions a little bit better organized. The setback requirements and Karst questions, would those be appropriate for Mr. Houston, or should I reserve those for Mr. Javati? Mr. Javati?
So what I would say is with regard to setbacks, Mr. Houston can testify to those.
All right.
There also, to the extent that there is information he may not have, we also have Jorge Medina that can testify to the site plan and setback. With regard to Karst questions, I would defer to Bill. And Bill, I just want to make sure, how do I pronounce your last name? And I apologize, Bill.
Randy, the Karst questions would be to Sadra Habadi.
Okay, to Sandra? Okay,
Coffell.
okay.
Okay. And what about scenic surrounding compatibility? Would that be Mr. Houston as well?
That, yeah, I would, yes, I think he would be the most appropriate, and to the extent that there may be some information he doesn't have, Jorge Medina may be able to answer that as well.
All right, and what about noise?
Noise, Wu, would that be you, or would that be Bill or
That
Sandra?
would be William Koppel on the line.
Koffel? Okay. And traffic?
Traffic, would that be you, Wu?
I could take that on.
Thank you.
All right. And economic impact? Would that be Mr. Houston?
Yes.
And what about zoning and decommissioning issues? Would that be Mr. Houston also?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, that would be Mr. Houston as well. And I apologize. The Zoom calls, I always feel like I'm interrupting and stepping on toes, so I apologize.
No, I completely understand. All right. So with regard to the setback requirements, you mentioned in your clarification earlier that a new site plan has been filed that addresses the issue of 4 properties that were closer than the ordinance would permit. So has that issue been completely resolved so that the plan is now totally within those zoning requirements once you've indicated your correction today?
Yes, that is correct. Sorry, go ahead,
Mr.
Randy.
Houston, yeah.
Oh, I wasn't sure if you were asking, but yeah, is that for Mr. Houston?
Yes, that's for Mr. Houston, sorry.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. That all the panels have been moved back outside of the 250-foot ordinance requirement. And that new plan has been filed.
There's also a mention in our consultant's report concerning the sparsity of vegetation in the area. And I believe you've stated in your application and your answers that buffers will be added to mitigate the viewshed impacts. So has a plan been filed or created with regard to the location and type of vegetation? Mr. Houston?
Not yet. Basically, the way we're going to work with that, work with the county, with the planning director in Simpson County, is that we're going to take the ordinance, the specifics of the ordinance, which are spelled out, and then at that point, what we'll do is we'll then suggest different species with a landscape architect. That will be presented to the county as part of our development plan. And then at that point, it will be improved or augmented as the county sees fit. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the county will dictate to us what they would like us to do based on the ordinances that they have.
All right, so then we understand that the Simpson County Planning and Zoning people are working with you on that moving forward, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
All right,
Yep.
thank you. Let's see, then, I believe your next area was economic impact. So my questions relate to your application Appendix E at page 3. There is a table and some various pieces of information with regard to the tax implications and the tax treatment by the state and Simpson County. So my first inquiry is, could you give us an update on the status of the determination of the tax treatment by the state and Simpson County? Specifically, assessment and depreciation schedules, replacement value, income methods, and so on.
At this point, that's one of the discussions that the county will basically be having with us. So my understanding of the process and discussions we've had with the county, that once the project is up and operational, they will have their assessors and appraisers review the project, pick a valuation, whichever valuation method they would like to use. Then at that point, what they will do is they will present to us with the tax bill, much like any other construction endeavor in the county. You build a new house, they send people out to take a look at it, present an assessment and appraisal, and then at that point, they will send us a tax bill based on that assessment.
So you had some tax results presented in your table, and how then did you, or can you explain to us how those tax results were arrived at?
I apologize. Let me just pull that, Randy. Can you help me pull up a copy of that submission, please?
You're breaking up a little bit, Braden. I apologize.
If you can pull a copy of our initial submission, please.
It's Appendix E. There's various tables on tax results. There's some
Appendix E,
charts.
yes. I apologize. I'm having trouble accessing it from my shared file here. Randy, could you please send me a copy of that directly right now, just so I can open it? I can't seem to unlock this right now.
Yep,
Thank
I'm
you.
having it sent over right now.
Okay. Do you want me to skip forward and come back to that?
Thank you.
Oh, you've got it now?
Please, it should be there in a second, but yeah.
We're sending it right now. I apologize.
Okay. Well, let me ask about the conditional use permit. In response to our consultant's report, you provided that updated site plan, and you indicated you were continuing to work on the development plan with planning and zoning. So what is the current status of the previously granted conditional use permits? Can you explain that in relation to the litigation or any further requirements that they're putting on you from Simpson County Planning and Zoning?
If it's possible, may I defer that question to Randy Sanders? He's actually in charge of that litigation right now. He will be better able to answer that in a more succinct fashion.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm happy to discuss that. At this point, the
So
way that
Mr.
the county,
Mr. Saunders, so I don't want to, just want to try to keep things clean here. I'm not looking for a person to simultaneously represent and appear as a witness. So,
because I was,
yeah, it's okay. So I think what I'd feel more comfortable with, as a post-hearing data request, we'll file a written post-hearing data request specifically seeking information on that. You all will be able to file a response under oath, affirmation, identify a witness that can support the documents and the response. And if you want to provide documentary responses to answer the question, I think that would be ideal in this situation.
thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.
And would that same thing apply to the decommissioning plan? Are you still working on the decommissioning plan and the development plan as well? Will that be, we can include that in our request?
Yes, that's one of
Mr. Houston?
Yes, that's one of the things that we were putting together. We basically have the plan, the number of workers, the number of machines, trucks, things like that, scrap values and things like that. Typically what will happen is, as we are having our discussions with the other aspects of the development plan with the county, that is one of the items that we are openly discussing with the county right now in terms of evaluation for our bond or letter of security that will accompany the project. So ultimately, until we have the project finally built, it's more speculative in terms of the cost of the decommissioning, but we have a very good idea of, we know how many panels will be out there, so we should be able to get a very, very close approximation based on the numbers that I presented in the report here. So
All right, with regard to that decommissioning issue, and I realize you're still working on that, but are you aware of recent decisions of this body, different siting boards that require basically calculations on some of those bond requirements to be done by third parties as opposed to the individuals who've negotiated the lease?
Yes, and we're comfortable. Typically, the way we'll do this is, as I said, Simpson County is the ultimate authority in how much that bond needs to be. We'll present data, the information. At that point, the county can take a look at that. If they do want to hire a third party, they're certainly welcome to do that, and come back. And it really revolves a lot around the value of the scrap, copper, steel, the aluminum, which are obviously very significant. But that's one of the open discussions, depending on how the county would like to handle that. Ultimately, we're definitely open to that, the idea of somebody else providing an assessment of the actual decommissioning cost, not just our models.
You mentioned in response to the second request for information that you did reach some negotiations with the landowners, and you did provide those leases, which at present are filed under confidentiality until your motion is ruled upon. So let me just
Correct.
ask do we have all the leases in the record, even if they're confidential? Do we have all the participating landowner leases in front of us once your motion is ruled upon?
Yes, I believe so. There are two leases. You should have copies of both of them.
All right. And are you aware that normally the siting board would want the surety to be in place before the project or at the time the project commences? And is that any kind of issue for you all?
No. Yeah, we're aware of that. And that's how our leases are structured with the landowners, that the minute we exercise the leases, we then are required to put down our security deposit, whatever the amount is, and then obviously whatever the county has in place as well. So we would once we exercise the lease options, then at that point we would fund the security deposits for all parties involved, both landowners and the county.
Okay, now did you get that application in front of you now to go back to that tax issue?
Let's see if it's arrived yet. Yep, here we have it. Thank you for being patient.
So we were
It
talking,
is Appendix A.
I think we were talking about how the tax results presented in your tables and in your answers were derived, what the basis of the determination was, since you have explained already that the county has not set this information yet.
Right. So let me just scroll down. So gross domestic product. Let's see, we have estimated costs. So in terms of the, and if you could help me specifically how the numbers were calculated. So all these numbers, all this information will have been pulled directly from the state, the county tax requirements. In terms of the economic impact of the project, that obviously is here. This is we're talking about the in-plan, in-plan, but specifically, let's see. Just scrolling through this.
Well, there's a
terms
little
of the-
chart, I think it may be on page 3 possibly of the economic impact analysis. It's got a
Okay.
graph on it, and then it's got 2 charts for the in-plant economic indicators for Simpson County. It mentions.
Yes, I do see the chart. Yeah,
Right.
the chart.
Right.
And you're talking specifically, I apologize, about the economic impact?
The economic impact, yes, yes. So we're talking
Yes,
about the.
yes, I do that.
The tax
Yeah.
treatment and the economic impact are the 2 related questions here. So
Right.
we're asking about how did you arrive at the economic impact from the tax standpoint? And then with regard to this chart, I have some additional questions with regard to the specifics of this labor income.
Absolutely. So what I'll do, basically the way we calculate this is that we go, and I'll let Wu speak a little, Ms. Smith talk a little bit more about this, as that they ultimately ran this analysis. But basically what we do is we'll take the economics of the project, the cost of the project, the construction cost, how many people are going to be working there, how many months this takes, all the different kind of economic factors that go into this. And then we put this into the in-plan software package, which is relatively well known amongst different entities evaluating economic impacts. At that point, this is the analysis that is put back out from that software package. I would defer to Wu a little bit more if you wanted to get into the details of exactly how the inputs work, but essentially this is a result of the in-plan software package.
Okay, so you mentioned that there will be $29.7 million in construction labor income. And
Yes.
I believe later in a matter which involved our first data request item 55E, we asked about how that number was generated and some questions about these same charts. There have been some answers provided that are currently redacted in the record and which were provided to the citing board. But there's a significant difference. I think we could say that without breaching your motion at the present time until it's ruled upon. There's a significant difference in the responses to those data requests. So what happened there with the 29.7 million? Can you explain that for us?
Yes, so I mean, basically the way we looked at this, once we went through the kind of the second iteration of the questioning, was that we wanted to be able to provide something that's readily accessible to everyone. It's kind of, as I'll call this, an external calculation. This software is available to anybody that can purchase a copy of this. So we felt like using this number really takes it out of our hands, our review, and puts it into a software, as I said, it's pretty well respected in the industry in different evaluations, so that this is the number coming from a software plan that we didn't, we're not calculating this specifically. And I think for the purposes of the board, this allows you to see this from a third party. We had talked a little bit about this earlier, but that you can see this coming from a third party as opposed to us calculating this from our kind of our own internal calculations.
Well, what different inputs or assumptions were made in order to arrive at that rather large difference in the economic impact? Can you
I
explain
think
those?
part of, and sometimes it's more, it maybe isn't so much the inputs as it is the outputs in terms of how some of the labor numbers, we switched some of the labor numbers around a little bit. We had, initially we were kind of between whether there were going to be 200 employees on site at any given time in the max scenario versus now 300, just based on the timing of everything. We had a more in-depth analysis of the actual construction as we went through the process a little bit more. I think obviously with inflation, as everyone's seen this here in the last few months, labor costs have gone up significantly. Obviously materials and labor have gone up. So these are, I think, a summary of both a reevaluation of the time and number of employees on site and a combination with that of impacted labor costs and materials. I mean, obviously material costs on the other side, but that's what we're looking at.
If I may, I'm not sure that Braden understands your question, because I think what you're getting at is the difference in the overall numbers that we utilized. If I
Yes,
could potentially ask him a question,
I'm
or if
asking-
not,
Right. There was I don't want to say the number because it's the subject
Right.
of your motion, but there's a
I know
substantial
exactly.
difference between 29.7 million and the number given for economic impact. So the question is, if there's that much of change, and he just explained it had to do with taking it in a more fine, refined approach. I think that's what he was explaining. So then the question becomes, well, what changes were made to the inputs or the assumptions in order to make that kind of a drop? So we're just trying to see so that the siting board can have a clear understanding of what is the correct economic impact, what is the correct labor income. I mean, is this, perhaps we should do this as opposed to hearing data requests, so you could provide us with whatever the accurate number is, unless Mr. Houston has that available and can explain it.
I apologize. In terms of wanting to provide the board, if this is something we could do under confidentiality, I would appreciate that, just due to all the parties involved on this call.
Mr. Chairman, do you want to try to go into a confidential session, or what would your pleasure be on this.
I think it may make more sense for us to ask it as a post-hearing data request so that they can go line by line and provide the inputs and the reason for the distinction. And then that will give us an opportunity to actually rule as to whether the information in the documents fall under the the exceptions for the Kentucky Open Records Act.
All right, so we'll just include those in the post-hearing data request, and we'll ask you specifically to explain the lines of this chart that you indicated, maybe even
Certainly.
Ms. Wu might have to answer, so we'll include that.
Yeah. And we'd be happy to just, like I said, line by line, show you every input initially, secondary inputs, so you can see it very clearly exactly what we inputted initially, and then what we put in the model based on the timing differences of labor costs, capital costs, things like that. But yes, thank you.
Okay, let me see if I've covered everything that you said you could cover. I think that's all that you've indicated would be appropriate for this particular witness.
Maureen, I don't see either of our ad hoc members on here at this time, so we'll start with Deputy Secretary Lyons. Do you have any questions for the witness?
Perhaps, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Houston, if these should be directed to Mr. Giavotti, just let me know. But they're general questions about Karst, not about the geotechnical report. But I did notice in PVA's, well, let me start with this one first. With the recent site plan that you resubmitted based on the Simpson County zoning, I did notice, I think, and I just want you to confirm that you did address the karst avoidance areas that was in the geotechnical report. It looks like you did do that, but I just wanted to confirm.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, we basically essentially just tightened the panels up a little bit. So the panels that we had to move that were in violation of the 250-foot setback, we just kind of pushed them, tightened the layout a little bit more, but definitely avoided all the karst avoidance areas as we had before.
Okay. And this was in the environmental assessment report. There's also a karst reference in there and a section in there. That reference, there may be issues with pile driving. What is the alternate plan to traditional pile driving if karst issues do pose a problem with driving the piles?
So basically, kind of, sorry, I'll go ahead. So basically, there's three scenarios, I should say. Number one is to just, if we do find an area that comes up with we get refusals, significant number of refusals in a particular area, we may try to move those panels out of there. Now, again, we've gone out, we've done some geotechnical work, obviously, in the field, so we have a pretty good idea of what lies out there, but obviously we did not do a geotech study of every single post that we're going to drop. So if we do run into an area where we're hitting more refusals than we would think we normally would, at that point we may evaluate just moving the panels again, kind of tightening up the area, moving those panels out of that particular area. Second option is we could drill if we need to drop it in there. Typically we're going down with these posts, 5, 6, 7 feet, really depends on what we get with our pull tests. But we would go in, and then at that point, we would just grout the poles in there as we do anyway, post anyway. So that's kind of one scenario. The other scenario is if we do run into significantly more, then we might have the opportunity to do some gravity-based piles where we could just put them in. We can actually bring out pads, drop those out in the field, and put the post in that. But that's highly unlikely that we would ever do that. Most likely our scenarios are a drill or just moving them if there aren't a significant number.
Okay, thank you. The other two questions I have are regarding the reference to some abandoned oil wells. And it's not so much about where they're at, because I understand that there's no visual observation of these wells and perhaps they're underground. But your application in the appendix in particular referenced some Kentucky Department of Environmental Protection forms that y'all obtained through a Freedom of Information request. And I was just wondering what those forms were, because I'm not exactly sure. I did pass along the topographical map and the aerial photo where you all think the wells might have been located to our Division of Oil and Gas to get their opinion about what may or may not be out there based on their records or based on Kentucky Geological Survey records. And I haven't heard back from them, but Mr. Houston, do you know what forms that was referencing?
I do not I do not specifically, but what I'll do is I'll defer that to Wu Smith. She would know that probably off the top of her head.
That's fine. We'll address that with Ms. Smith when we get to her. The other question is, do you know if all the mineral rights in that area are owned by the landowners?
That's my understanding of it, yes.
Okay, thank you. No further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Rowland, any questions?
One question back on the economic impact analysis, which was Exhibit E or Appendix E. You estimate that there will be 100 construction jobs during the construction period of the project, and that there will be some ongoing tech jobs, maintenance jobs during the lifetime of the project. Do you have any idea on the number of jobs that will remain during the lifetime of the project?
Yes, I mean, it's not, I'd love to say it was a huge manufacturing facility, but it's not. We know that. But typically what we'll have is we'll have a series of part-time employees that will do different things. So for instance, we'll contract with some local landscapers, if you will, to maintain the properties. So they'll go out, they'll cut the grass, they'll trim any trees, they'll replace any dead vegetative screening. So they're going to be in charge of just basically taking care of that site, making sure that it stays clean, we don't have any trash pileups, things like that. That's kind of their, so they would be kind of quote unquote on staff. They would be employees of the project. They would stay there. You know, they live in town. They're able to go out there in the summertime. They're probably going to be cutting that pretty consistently as they go across the site. Then you're going to have things with maybe some snow removal. I don't think we're going to have that. It will be a major issue. But then you're going to have the technical folks, the people that are going to be doing and I talk about scheduled and unscheduled maintenance as we talk about this. So we have people that are going to go and, you know, this could be a local electrician. If we have some issues with an inverter, somebody will dispatch. They might be able to go out, take a look at it, you know, twist a couple wires, fix it. We're all set. Then there's kind of the concept, and those people could probably be local, depending on the quality, the type of work. Obviously, at the lower levels, you can use kind of a journeyman electrician, maybe even a master electrician if needed. But if you're talking about some of the higher voltages, that's somebody that's probably going to have to come in from outside. There may be some people in Franklin County or in Franklin or Simpson County that could do that work, which would be great if they could be local. It's a pretty high level skill set. And then in terms of unscheduled maintenance, so we'll have at some point replace the inverters. If some of the panels get damaged for some particular reason, those jobs will have people kind of come in probably from outside. There will be, hopefully, if we can hire some people locally to help with that. But let's just say, you know, we have a wind event and 100 panels are damaged. We'll have to buy new panels. We'll have to have them replaced. Some labor definitely would be local. But in terms of, to answer your question, in terms of how many jobs we're creating a series of temporary jobs. I would say probably 5 to 10 temporary jobs. And then by that, I mean, full-time FTEs, you're probably talking 2 to 4 people, something like that, if you kind of did an equivalency operationally long-term, if you talked about that. I don't know if that helps answer your question.
It does. And just out of curiosity, for a project this size, is there any average you have on scheduled and unscheduled maintenance? Like we expect that we'll have this many issues per week, per month.
Yeah. So now we have the tracking systems. So the tracking systems, you know, they're going to need maintenance and they're going to need repairs. A lot of that's pretty simple maintenance. You go out, you just kind of lubricate the mechanisms, lubricate the motors, things like that. So you're probably going to have people out there, you know, every couple of months going out and doing a series of these things. And as I'm sure you well can imagine, as time goes by, it's going to require more maintenance, just like a car. The first couple of years, everything works great. Inverters, to specifically speak to that, typically we expect the inverters need to be replaced about every 10 years, give or take. So we probably replace the inverters 2 to 3 times, depending on the full length of the project. But yeah, in terms of how often people are going to be out there, summertime, cutting the grass is probably going to be somebody out there in one part or another of the project doing that, you know, most of the summer. Maintenance, turning wrenches, things like that, you know, every couple times a week, maybe on average over the course of 30 or 40 years.
Okay. One last question. I'm on the last page of Appendix E. For the in-plan model, it has some different numbers as far as the increase in labor income and the increase in value-added impacts. Do you know the time frame for this model? Is that just the 12 to 18 month construction period, or is this the total economic impact over the lifetime of the project?
That is a good question. Let me look at this specific paragraph. And then I know Wu might be able to answer this when she's questioned. I think this is going to be, it looks like it may be, I'm thinking this is just during the construction of the project, not the long-term, you know, the 30 to 40 years of operational, of the operation of the project. Yeah, it doesn't say specifically. Let me look at that. I apologize. I don't have that off the top of my head. And as I said, Wu might be able to evaluate that. But the way I'm reading this, this is just for the construction, the 12 to 18 month construction period.
Okay. And sorry, one more question. Does the company plan to use an IRB for this project? And if so, is there a status update or anything you can provide on that?
And I apologize, just to make sure I have the acronym right. IRB is a
industrial revenue bond.
As far as I know, we do not. Industrial revenue. Yeah, we haven't modeled that, so I don't think we would have any kind of special tax treatment from the county.
Okay. That's all for me, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chair Cummings?
Yes, I do have a few questions. Good afternoon, Mr. Houston.
Hello?
Does OPD Energy expect to maintain ownership of Horus Kentucky 1 during the operations phase of this project?
At some point, you know, we're talking to development partners. This is kind of part of a macro deal that we're talking to some other developers about. But yeah, I mean, at some point we may sell this project. There's definitely nothing definitive at this point. This would be, if we were to sell it, I think where we would go with this is we would sell the project to another very capable developer. These are the individuals that we're talking to right now, a large company. I'm not at liberty to discuss that, but yes, that would be the thing. We could either keep it or we would sell it, depending on status. And it's like anything else, you know, different economic needs of the company. We need to raise capital because we have other projects that we're looking to build, may necessitate the sale of the project. But we are talking to other developers about not just this project, but a larger partnership type agreement where we might be able to package some of our projects with their projects. And that, you know, I apologize, I can't go into too much more detail, but yes, it would be the possibility that we could sell it and that they would own it. We'd take our capital and go finish some of our other projects in some other states.
Okay. Shifting to a slightly different topic, back to Karst. Does OPD Energy have construction experience in karst terrain?
Specifically, we do not, to the best of my knowledge. However, as we go through the EPC process, obviously one of the things as we hire out this construction to a company, you know, we look at obviously some of the larger companies, well bonded, well experienced with these sorts of construction. But that's one of the primary criteria that we have as part of our I'll call it our matrix in going through who we select ultimately to be the EPC provider, is Karst experience. Obviously, the economics have to be, relatively strong as well, but, and obviously somebody that is well bonded, well experienced. But yes, we will get somebody that has a little more experience than we do.
Okay, and that may have preempted my next question, which was, do you expect to maintain the same geotechnical consultant for the construction phase? It sounds like if you are bidding out the construction, they may be hiring geotech.
Correct, yeah, so we've had our, worked with Terracon, with Wu on this for a very long time. We've been very pleased with the efforts that they've put in. They were able to, assess everything very early on, tell us that this was a doable project. Been very pleased, so yeah, we fully expect that we would stay with them throughout the entire process of the construction, all the way through to the COD.
Okay. My last area of question is about the cemeteries. Are you who I can talk to about the cemeteries?
I am the person, yes. Yes.
Lucky you. I see that there are two within about less than a mile and one that is actually a historical cemetery inside the fence. Is that right?
That's right. We call it the Kitchen Cemetery. It's got about 5 headstones out there. It's just a small, essentially a family cemetery out there from, I believe it was the 20s, when it was kind of utilized back in that time period, 20s, 30s. It's been, sad to say, it's been kind of abandoned. It just has a little wire fence around it. There's not much more to it. But yeah, we are definitely aware of it. Obviously, we had made sure to keep our panels 250 feet away from it as per the requirements of the county. And then we're also going to go out and put, just some vegetative screening around it, just to kind of pretty it up a little bit and set it off a little bit more from everything else out there.
Okay. Have any provisions been made with the underlying landowner to allow, for lack of a better word, visitation to the cemetery if any family members show up?
Yeah, we definitely did. So we talked to, we basically had this, ironically, we had this discussion a couple of weeks ago about the best way to do this, because obviously we're going to have a security fence, and in order to access that, you'd have to go through the fence. So basically the way we thought that the best methodology for this would be to put a phone number on the fence line, and basically contact us by email, by phone, and then what we can do is we can have our kind of site manager or somebody locally come out and then just take that person individually out to the cemetery pretty much whenever they want, obviously within reason, but that's kind of the way we would like to do it. We've looked around for any kind of family members, anybody like that. We didn't really find anyone, we didn't dig all that hard, but, we asked around. I know Charlie Hill, who's our landman in the area, didn't really see anybody or know anybody. He's obviously local and knows a lot of people. Hadn't really found a lot of people, relatives, anything like that. So we just, like I said, we'll leave it open to the general population. If they'd like to come and see it, happy to let you in and come out and spend some time out there.
Okay. Now, the other two cemeteries, are they both actively being used for burials?
No, not to my knowledge. As far as I know, no one's been buried out there in quite some time.
Okay, in either the church cemetery or the Bryant Cemetery? I'm not sure if
Oh, I'm
that's
sorry, I thought you were talking about kitchens,
No,
or are you talking about the
wasn't
one
very
off
clear.
site?
I've moved on to the two outside the
Okay,
fence.
all right, yeah. I apologize. I don't know the answer to that question. If those two cemeteries are still active, I don't know.
Okay. If they are, I would suggest that if possible, that some, information is either left with the church, since one appears to be associated with the church, or the other cemetery. So if there is a burial, any construction can be coordinated, so you're not pile driving 250 feet from an active funeral.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a simple request. We could definitely do that. We'll leave a notice with the churches, with both churches. If they plan on any kind of burials, things like that, just let us know, and we could, give us the hour there, a couple of hours, I'm sure, and we could probably, just have the guys do some safety training or something. So.
Okay, that is my last question. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Butler, any questions?
Just want to follow up on the cemetery that's within the fence. Are you gonna have it posted on the fence for people to call? Or will you
Yes.
have a small access road that they can get back to the cemetery?
No, what we'll do is we'll have a notice on the fence. So we have a gated security fence. And then what'll happen is if someone's interested, they would go call that number. And then we could set up a time that would like to go out to the cemetery. Because what we don't want to have happen is allow access in the fence line, simply because, just for security reasons, for safety and security reasons. But yeah, we would have the number, pick up the number, call, and we can set up something up relatively quickly to get whomever would like to get out there and see the cemetery.
When you say relatively quickly,
I'm thinking like a day. I mean, if they call us on Sunday, maybe not, but, within a day or so, I think is definitely doable. We're gonna have, as I said, we'll have that landscaping team that will work with us throughout, quote unquote, throughout the year. So what we would do is we would just have the number maybe come to us at OPD Energy. I would then pick up the phone, or whoever the designated project manager at that time is, just pick up the phone, call our landscaping team, say, hey, Mike, could you please go out there and let somebody in for a couple hours? Something like that is the way we envisioned it.
so you'll have it attached to a local person. What I'm getting at, there are a lot of people that go to a lot of these small cemeteries that are genealogy
Yes.
people, and I don't know if there's some way to put it or connect it to the ancestry sites, to call this number for access. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if they do that.
Yeah.
But if you could, you do a little
Yeah.
research and see if that, because, a lot of people think, oh, a small little cemetery in the middle of, this little town is not gonna
I see
be a
what you're
problem.
saying. Right, and they drive from Indiana and they show up and they can't get in for a day. Got it. Yeah, I think I don't know much about that, like how it works with the genealogy sites, but yeah, I think if there is a way, it wouldn't be that difficult to be able to put a number on that if that is possible. I assume you may know a little bit more about this than I do, so.
I just know my mom used to do that, and
Yeah.
I've been to many of these small cemeteries.
Huh, interesting, yeah. But yeah, it sounds like we could probably do something like that, or maybe even have something in town. So leave it with the Historic Commission. We visited the Historic Commission, spoken to them. Historic Commission, and maybe, I'm thinking of maybe some governmental office in town that if somebody calls about the cemetery, there'd be a number registered to that.
Yes.
Somebody picks up the phone in the county,
Yeah.
clerk's office and, okay, yeah, I think that's
Thank-
easy to do. Yep, absolutely.
So, Mr. Houston, I have just a few questions. One is you mentioned at the outset of your comments that the applicant, that you all have recently changed your site layout. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And that site layout, that change was provided in response to the siting board's consultant report, right?
That is correct.
Okay. So, as part of the application in this matter, as part of this application in this matter, and maybe it was actually to the first round of data requests, there was a noise study that was completed that indicated the distance from approximately, I think it was around 65, maybe 63 noise receptors to certain facilities, to the substation, inverters, and to panels. Are you aware of the study that I'm referring to?
Yes.
Okay. So that study indicates, I think only two, well, let me just ask this. Would you agree that given the update, the site layout update that was filed in response to the consultant's report, that the distances to those noise receptors from panels, substations, and inverters are necessarily different than they were when it was filed?
For a couple, yeah, for those four, I believe there were 4 receptors, 4 houses that were within 250 feet. So now every single one of those is 250 feet or greater from the panels.
Okay, so I'm going to ask I'll ask as a post-hearing data request, and we'll provide this to you in writing. Given the proposed site layout changes that were filed in response to the consultant's report, that if you would provide the new distances in a similar manner that you did in the noise study from all of the identified 60-something noise receptors and the nearest panel, inverter, and substation.
Certainly, yes. I know we have calculated that, and I apologize. We may have included that, I just off the top of my head, maybe Wu can answer that as when you get to asking her, Ms. Smith, when you get to asking her some questions. But yes, we can absolutely provide it. If we hadn't already, we have already calculated that, so we can definitely do it.
The other thing that would be helpful for me in consideration in this case, and that I've not necessarily seen in the record, although it's a voluminous record, so I may have missed it, is a map that indicates each one of those 60-something noise receptors in relation to the site layout.
Yes, we can definitely get that. I think we have put that together at some point. I know it's a very long document, but yes, if it's not in there already, we can absolutely provide that. Distances, every single one of those. I believe we had a numerical count of the different receptors. Some of them were warehouses, some of them were commercial, residential, agricultural, abandoned buildings. So, but yeah, we have that, and let's make sure we hadn't already included it, but either way, we'll get that for you.
Okay. If you have not provided that updated noise receptor distance following the site layout, an indication as to how you categorize each one of those noise receptors, whether it's a barn, whether it's a grain bin, whether it's a home, would be helpful as well.
Yes.
I want to ask about and it may just be the statutory or the planning and zoning language, and I'm just not aware of that distinction. But one of the things that was referred to in the application was a 250-foot setback from, churches, from nursing homes, and then it doesn't say from residences. It says from residential zoned properties. That's the exact distinction that the application makes in discussing that 250-foot setback. So is that a term that you all were using, or is that a term that the Planning and Zoning Commission uses to determine what that 250-foot setback is necessary for?
That would have come from planning and zoning. I apologize, I'd have to read through the whole ordinance again. I didn't pick up on that distinction, but typically, our conversations were with the county, make sure that it's 250 feet away from all of the the panels are at least 250 feet away from all of the houses. So I'd have to double check that.
And so that's
Reread that
what
ordinance.
that's what I want to, I guess, get clarification on. When you said in response to the consultant's report that you had to update it to ensure it complied with the planning and zoning, I want to understand what your measurements are. Is it 250 feet between either a substation, inverter, string inverter, battery, or panel and a home? Or is it 250 feet from the property line of a property that has a home? Or is it 250 feet from the receptor or the property line, whichever one, of an area that is zoned residential?
Okay. If you don't mind, what I'll do is we have our design engineer on the phone here now, Jorge Medina. He could answer that question a lot better than I could. If you would like me to pass that over to him, or if you'd like to ask him later.
We'll ask Mr. Medina when he's put up.
Certainly.
Hello, this is Jorge Medina from OPD Energy.
Yeah, so Mr. Medina, we'll come to you once we get through Mr. Houston. We'll let Mr. Saunders call his witnesses as he sees fit, but I'll reserve that question when it's your turn, Mr. Medina. All right, those are all the questions I have. Mr. Saunders, do you have any redirect for Mr. Houston?
I do not, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Houston, I would just ask a couple of the questions you've pushed off onto others out of risk that they're unable to answer them. I'd ask that you would stick around. We may just come back to you to see what response you can provide.
I'll be here to the end.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, David Broderick, on behalf of Pitt and Baldwin, based upon the questions been asked, Mr. Houston, I do have a very few questions to clarify with him, if I may please, sir.
On a particular issue?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Houston, in your all's application, Exhibit F has to do with the conditional use permit applications and exhibits. Does that include everything that you have filed with planning and zoning and the Board of Adjustments in Franklin and Simpson County?
I'm going to defer that one to our counsel, Randy Sanders. I'm not sure exactly what has or has not been filed to the T. So like I said, I'm very cautious here to get into, I'm not sure where you're going to go with this, because we had these issues with the conditional use permit when we got into those meetings. The county had told you a number of times to keep things relevant, and we had obviously a lot of issues with that. So I'm just kind of curious if you have specific questions, and again, I will defer obviously to the chairman, but I feel like we're going down this line of questioning where you're just going to do this for another 2 hours.
Mr. Houston, leave that up to me. I don't think
Yes.
I'm not going to let Mr. Broderick take over control of the hearing. But I think it's a relevant question, just to identify what documents may or may not have been filed in response to that statement in the application.
Certainly. So is it okay then if I defer that to our counsel, because he knows exactly, he'll have the exact, chapter and verse.
Council can't respond. I assume Mr. Broderick is asking you because you're the affiant for the application.
Right.
And if that's not the case, then that's fine. You can defer to the person who was, who did provide those, the documents under oath in the application. I think my presumption was that was you, Mr. Houston.
Yeah, I submitted so I submitted the application.
So, Mr. Broderick, if you could, ask your question again, and if you could cite the specific portion of the application you're referring to so that Mr. Houston can refer to it, I think that would be helpful.
I am referring to his responses to the sitting board staff first request for information to Horus Kentucky 1 LLC. And in that response, there was Exhibit F. It says conditional use permit applications and exhibits. And my question has to do with, he's the affiant in that situation. And my question is simply this: does Exhibit F constitute everything that you file with planning and zoning and the Board of Adjustments in Franklin and Simpson County?
Let me go down to Exhibit F.
And Chair, if I could, just, and I understand we're not in a court of law here, but again, the timing of what was produced and when, and we're getting into issues of what was produced to planning and zoning at different periods of time, as opposed to what was produced with the application with the PSC, so.
Yeah, and that's you're not necessarily making an objection, Mr. Saunders, but all they're asking for is what is in the response and what isn't in the response. And if there's something that's not in the response because it wasn't filed yet, when the response was given, it wasn't, a document yet in the public forum, then that's a fine response for Mr. Houston to provide. But I think it's a relevant question as to what documents were provided in response to that.
The best of my knowledge, I think it's tough because I don't want to say definitively one way or the other, because we filed a whole series of documents since we've gone through the conditional use permit process, and it's very difficult for me to say. I don't want to say something that's not true because I don't, off the top of my head, know the timeline of when we filed certain things and certain days. Obviously, it's been a lot of stuff. So that's why, and I apologize for you're sensing this hesitancy to answer this question. It's not because I don't want to, it's just because I'm really not exactly sure, based on, without having a whole series of notes in front of me, what days, what times, what was filed before and after the conditional use permits. We went through 2 sets of conditional use permits. Is he talking about the first conditional use permit, the second conditional use permit? So I'm just struggling to answer this without putting my foot in my mouth. If I get a date wrong, it's going to be held against me at some point.
I don't know as a fine answer, Mr. Houston. Mr. Broderick, do you have any additional questions on this line?
Yes, sir. I would ask this, that did you file a development plan as part of Exhibit F?
A development plan? Not yet.
Okay.
So not yet. That's part of what we're going through. So that, yeah, that's a simple question. No, we have not done that yet. That's part of what we're going through with the county right now, is going through the development plan, going through the development process to add conditions to the conditional use permit. As we discussed earlier, we're talking about vegetative screening, we're talking about the security bond, we're talking about a whole series of items along those lines.
With the exception of the development plan, and I may have misunderstood it, but I can correct it now, and so can you. Have you complied with everything, as you understand it, that you had to do for this application with the Board of Adjustments and Planning and Zoning?
I would believe so.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Mr. Saunders, any redirect?
Sorry, no, I have nothing further, thank you.
Okay. All right, Mr. Houston, I appreciate it. Please stand by in case there are any additional questions. Mr. Saunders, you have an additional witness?
We do, and I was going to defer, I know that there was an outline of questions, and so to make it easiest on staff, I believe that the Karst questions were next, and if that was the case, I was going to call Sadra Body next, but I wanted to make sure that was in line with your outline of questions.
I think Wu Smith or Sadra Javadi, either one would be a fine next witness from our perspective.
So let's start with Wu Smith, and then we'll go with Sadra next.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Smith, please raise your right hand, turn on your microphone and video. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Okay, please state your name and address for the record.
Wu Smith, address is 13050 Eastgate Parkway in Louisville, Kentucky, zip code 40223.
Okay. Mr. Saunders, you may ask.
Thank you, Chairman. Wu, good afternoon. How are you today?
Good, thank you.
And can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes. Can you tell this body your current job title?
I am a senior associate and a regional environmental department manager for Terracom Consultants.
And you've been here today as we've been discussing the Horus project in Franklin Simpson, Kentucky. Have you been involved with that project for some time?
Correct. Yep. I oversaw the environmental and due diligence reports for the project.
All right. And have you been involved as we have responded to data requests for this body?
Yep. I was involved in both requests.
All right. Can you describe, and I know you just did briefly, but maybe just with a little bit greater detail, specifically your role in this project and your involvement?
Yep. Like I said, I oversaw all the environmental and due diligence technical reporting to support not just the facility, but the Kentucky Siting Board application process, and as well as the environmental assessment that was conducted on behalf of the Tennessee Valley Authority. They are entering into a power purchase agreement with Horus, which triggered the need for an EA to be filed.
All right. And I know that we're all in different places today in the new Zoom world, but you do have several documents in front of you. And if we could just go through so that the board knows what you have available to you for the purposes of their questioning, could you let them know?
I have the original application open, both the RFIs that were responded to, the Harvey economic report, as well as our latest supplemental response that was filed.
Chairman, with the Langland Foundation, I don't have any further questions that would turn this witness over for this body's question.
Mr. Broderick, do you have any questions for the witness?
Excuse me for the delay. No, sir, I do not.
It's all right. We're all going to have to excuse each other when it comes to technology these days. Staff, counsel, any questions for Ms. Smith?
Yes, I understand that you were perhaps going to answer some of the questions on traffic and roadways. Is that correct?
I will do my best to answer it. We did work with another sub-consultant on that technical study, but like I said, I will do my best to answer, and if anything we can't address, we're happy to address in the post-hearing data request.
Okay, I just have a few questions. Could you tell us what stage you're in your discussions with the Simpson County authorities concerning damage to the roadways? Is that completed or still ongoing?
I believe that is still ongoing. That is something that Braden will have to confirm, but from my latest conversation, that is still ongoing.
So is there any sort of plan that is available to be produced to the siting board, or is it, or not yet?
I don't believe there's anything available yet, but like I said, Braden can confirm. From what I've heard, it was more than conversations and nothing, no deliverables to date.
Do you know whether that has included the potential of bonds with the county?
I'm not aware.
Am I correct that Horus has committed itself to restoring any impacted roadways to pre-construction conditions?
I believe that is the case.
That's all I have on that, but I think some of the economic impact questions got sort of deferred over to you as well.
And like I said, I'll try my best to answer. We worked alongside the council as well, so anything I cannot answer, we're happy to provide in the data request.
Okay, and this is in a way a sort of a follow-up to one of the siting board members' questions. The M-Plan information on workers during the construction site talks about, I think maybe over 30% of the labor income is expected to come from Simpson County. Is the majority of the labor going to be, the rest of the labor going to be from outside Simpson County, but still in Kentucky, or from outside the whole region?
I believe based on the latest conversations that we had with Braden's team, Horus will do whatever they can to absolutely hire from within the county. Any specialized, very technical people, most likely they will have to look outside of the county, but definitely will try their best to stay within the Commonwealth.
Most of the analysis, if not pretty much all of it, relates to the Simpson County impact. Is there an analysis available of the project using the state of Kentucky as the region, and that would be available to the siting board?
Not to date, but again, that is something we can provide as well. That is a data set that we can purchase from M-Plan for the whole state of Kentucky versus just a specific county.
So it would be feasible for you all to provide that in a post-hearing data request, the reworked analysis using the state as a whole?
I believe that is feasible.
All right. I think that's all the questions I have for this witness.
Deputy Secretary Lyons, any questions for the witness?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Hello, Ms. Smith. Good to see you again. Just a follow-up question I had on the Freedom of Information request that I assume that Terracon did on behalf of Horus with environmental protection here in the state. And it's reference to those oil wells that you all obtained forms. What forms were those again, or do you know?
So I have them in front of me. They're just one-page forms that it seems like a well registration form. I haven't really seen these before. They're pretty old. It's just one form, and it says, registration, operator name, lease name, all of that. And that is how we found out that there were 4, suspect historical wells on site. Then we followed up with the, interviews with current landowner, and that was included in our assessment.
What vintage are those forms? What years are those forms?
They are, let me see, 1985.
Okay, I know exactly what they are now. Those are Division of Water.
They're both dated September 1985.
Those are Division of Water, oil and gas registration
Yeah. Yes.
form that that program is no longer in effect with the Division of Water, so.
Yes,
Okay, thank
it does
you.
have the Division of Water stamp on it, so you're on it.
I know exactly what it is. Just one other question, and I appreciate Horus and Terracon's thoroughness on the environmental assessment and threatened endangered species review. Didn't leave me with many questions except one, and I just wanted to confirm, as far as the streams and wetlands delineation, this is a question I should ask Mr. Houston, I apologize. Is there intent to avoid all those areas in project development? Did I read that correctly?
Yes, so I mean, from the get-go, Horace committed to, avoidance measures, whenever possible when it came to wetlands, Karst, threatened endangered species. So any wetlands or streams or features that were identified through a wetland delineation report, they carved it out of the site plan, so there will not be impacting, there will not be any permits that will have to go through the Army Corps, Section 404, anything like that. And to add to it, the forested area to the southern portion, that will also be avoided, so there's no impact to listed bat species.
So no vegetation will be disturbed as well?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. No further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Rowland, any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chair?
Well, like Deputy Secretary Lyons, the fact that this was subject to NEPA and had a thorough EA done made my life a lot easier, so I don't actually have any questions. Thanks.
Commissioner Butler, any questions?
No questions.
Ms. Wu, can you help me with these, unless you can help me with these distances to noise receptors, which I hope Mr. Medina can, I don't have any questions for you either. Mr. Saunders, do you have any redirect for the witness?
I do not, but we're happy to provide that in the follow-up request.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. Is there any reason Ms. Smith can't be excused?
No, as
Okay.
far as we're concerned.
All right. Thank you for being here with us today. Ms. Smith, you may be excused.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Saunders, would you like to call your next witness?
Yes, Chairman, at this time, we would like to call Sadre Javati.
Mr. Javati, please turn on your camera, your microphone, and raise your right hand. There we go. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Okay, please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Sadra Javadi. Address is 13050 Eastgate Parkway, Louisville, Kentucky, zip code 40223.
Okay. Mr. Saunders, you may ask.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Could you tell this body your current job title?
Yeah, I'm a senior staff engineer in Geotechnical department out of Louisville, Kentucky. And I'm solely dedicated to the solar projects in our office.
All right. And can you describe a little bit about what you've reviewed and what your expertise is in that you could help with this body with today?
Sure. So as I mentioned, particularly I work on the solar projects. So my job is from the preliminary phase. I work with our plugins to develop the soil parameters and engineering parameters that they need to use for their design. And in our area, because we specifically we have the Karst issues, so I help with the investigation on that matter too.
All right. And you heard that there are some questions today regarding Karst. And do you feel that you would be able to answer those questions this afternoon?
Yes, sure.
All right. And now, again, you've heard me ask the other witnesses, so everybody's just on the same page. You have some materials with you, correct?
Correct.
Can you identify for this body those materials that you have in front of you for your reference?
Yeah, I have a copy of the latest site plan, and I have the Geotech and Karst reports in front of me.
Okay. And so the latest site plan is the one that was produced to this body following the report by Ed Hart, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Chairman, with that, with laying the foundation, I would turn this witness over for questioning about his body.
Mr. Broderick, do you have questions for Mr. Javadi?
No, sir.
Okay. Ms. Gosnell, any questions?
Yes, a few questions, sir. Can you explain what the plan is on particular setbacks for those identified and open sinkholes within the boundaries of the site?
Yeah, so during our Karst investigation, so that's our common practice. We rank them based on the nature of the findings. So we rank them from low risk to high risk. Particularly about the ones that we found at the boundary of the project. I mean, as long as they are like low risk, some of them are dismissed. So we don't have any issue to continue development. And if they are like high risk, we had a setback up to 100 feet. And when I reviewed the plan, it was like performed. They actually revised the layout. And the one more component I need to mention here is that because the Karst feature is something that like what we went out there, we did our reconnaissance, desktop review, we did our study. Definitely as a consultant, if we be chosen in the future, we're gonna be as a site to help if anything comes up during construction.
I'm sorry, did you say that when the new site plan was created, there were some changes made to those setbacks? The one where you moved some of the panels?
The latest site plan that I reviewed was the only version I reviewed, and the latest site plan is modified based on our recommendation. So all the setbacks are considered in the latest site plan.
Are there any areas that you all have identified as potential further risk? And if so, what steps would you take to guard those from the future risk?
Yeah, there were some areas that actually they are avoided. So as long as we follow that setbacks like 25 feet, ranging 25 feet to 100 feet setback, we should be fine. I mean, they are not planning to construct any panels, any buildings on that area. So at the moment, we don't see any threat there.
Nothing further.
Deputy Secretary Lyons, any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Rowland, any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chair Covage?
Yeah, just a few. Dr. Javadi, thanks for being here with us today. Did you, in your geotechnical investigation for this site, talk to any of the neighboring landowners about any of their experiences, about any voids that they knew of in the area, any sinkholes that had developed historically during any construction they had done?
Not really.
Okay. What about the current landowners? Was any discussion had with them?
I think I should defer this question to Mr. Houston. I mean, what we did, what I can talk about, like what happened during our investigation was, so that's our common practice. When we go out to the site, if we have the opportunity to meet with any of the property owners or tenants, definitely that's one of the a main source for us to spend some time on site and talk to them, and they usually are the best reference to let us know what's going on their side, because they know their land better than anybody else. But at the time of this project, in both phases, the Karst investigation and Geotech, we didn't have that opportunity. so we didn't meet anyone. We didn't.
Okay. And that's understandable. The borings that you took, was there any were there any rain events while you had those borings open or around the time that you took those?
Pardon, I didn't.
Were you out there during any rain events, particularly when you were doing any borings?
Top of my head, I remember a portion of the site when we did the investigation. It was during December, and I'm not particularly remembering if it was raining. I don't have answer to that question. I apologize.
Oh, that's fine. That's all the questions I've got. Thank you.
Commissioner Butler, any questions?
No questions.
Mr. Saunders, any redirect your witness?
No, Chairman, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Javati. Is there any reason Mr. Javati can't be excused?
Not as far as we're concerned.
Okay, thank you for being here today. We will take an 11-minute break. We've been going at it for about an hour and a half. So we'll take a recess until 3:15. We'll come back at 3:15.
Thank you.
We're back on the record in case number 2020-00417. Mr. Broderick, are you there? There we go.
Yes, sir.
If we don't get done by a little bit after 4, around 4:15, we'll take another break. If it's not yet in the record, it will be today. Earlier today, under the statutory authority granted to me as the designated chair of the siting board, earlier today by letter, I designated PSC Vice Chair Amy Cubbage as the Vice Chair of the siting board in this matter. A notice of filing with that letter will go into the record either today or tomorrow. But I have to take a short leave at around 4:15. So if we're still going, we'll take a break between 4 and 4:15. When we come back from that break, Vice Chair Cubbage will be on the dais, and if I'm done with my other thing in time, I'll be participating for the remainder of the hearing from my office remotely. So,
Mr. Chairman, if I can say one thing, it's David Bright. I have kind of the same issue. That's why my partner Brady Murley's here. I may have to step out in a little bit to attend a hearing that was short noticed on me today. So I wanted to let you know if you don't see me, that's why my partner is here also.
that'll be fine. Thank you, Mr. Broder. Mr. Saunders, you have any additional witnesses you'd like to call today?
We do, Chairman. I would like to call Jorge Medina. He is the Development Engineering Director for OPD Inter. And specifically, we had indicated he could address a little bit further in more detail design, layout, and setback issues that this body may have additional questions.
All right, Mr. Medina, please turn on your camera, your microphone, and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
Yes, I do.
Okay, please state your name and address for the record.
Jorge Medina, address 14290 Mulca Blossom Boulevard, Winter Garden, Florida, 34787.
Okay, Mr. Saunders, you may ask.
Thank you, Chairman. Jorge, can you please state your current job title?
Development Engineering Director.
All right, and can you tell this body what your job responsibilities are?
I do work supporting the development phases, more on the electrical infrastructure and technology, working from selecting trackers, solar modules, inverters, PV layout, up to the interconnection system, including transmission and distribution.
All right, and you've been involved in this project that we've been discussing today in Franklin Simpson in Kentucky for some time, correct?
I have been collaborating with Mr. Braden Houston on the technical part, yes.
And you assisted in the preparation of the application and the supplemental data request, correct?
Correct.
And you have certain documents, I believe you are on the road today, but you do have, or you've had the ability to review the same documents that we've discussed today, including the original application, the supplemental request or responses for data requests, and the economic report of Harvey Economics, and the final site layout plan. Is that correct?
Correct. I have the supplemental responses, RFI 1 and 2, along with the responses, the original application, and I have the layout handy.
All right. With that, Chairman, I would turn over Mr. Medina for questioning by this body.
Mr. Broderick, do you have any questions for Mr. Medina?
Not at this time, sir. Thank you.
Ms. Gosnell, any questions for Mr. Medina?
No, sir.
Deputy Secretary Lyons, any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Rowland?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chair Cubbage?
No questions?
Commissioner Butler?
No questions.
All right, I guess it's just me, Mr. Medina. I have questions on how do you, from the application, the term is, and I may be getting it the tiniest bit wrong, but I think it's 250 feet from a residential zoned property is what the setback in the application mentions. What is 250 feet from residential zoned property mean? And what is it measured beginning at and ending at?
We are taking into consideration any residential area, and we are taking the measurement from the property line up to the solar module or inverter or electrical substation closer to the substation, whichever is closer.
Okay, so it's not 250 feet between, so let's just say electrical facility, for purposes of these questions, includes a panel, an inverter, a string inverter, a battery, a substation, panel, yeah, okay. Those, let's just say panel, inverter, string inverter, battery, or substation, right? So those electrical facilities, you all are maintaining that you all commit to a 250-foot setback between any of those electrical facilities and the property line that is zoned residential or that has a residence on it.
Resident on.
Okay, so it's not necessarily 250 feet between the electric facility and the home, it's 250 feet between the facility and the property line.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Medina, I appreciate it.
Good. Thank you.
Mr. Saunders, any redirect of the witness?
No further questions, Chairman.
Okay. Is there any reason, Ms. Gosnell, that Mr. Medina can't be excused?
Not from our point of view, sir.
All right. Thank you very much for being here with us, Mr. Medina, and you may be excused for the remainder of the hearing. Mr. Saunders,
Thank you.
any additional witnesses?
Chairman, I did want to call Bill Coppell. I know there were some additional questions regarding the noise study and some of the noise issues. And so I would offer up our next witness, William Coppell.
Okay. Mr. Koffel, please turn on your camera, your microphone, and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Okay. Please state your name and address for the record.
Bill Coffell, 6252 Middle Ridge Road, Newport, Pennsylvania.
Mr. Saunders, you may ask.
Thank you. Can you state your current employer and provide us with a description of your job responsibilities?
Yeah, I work with Terracon. I'm an environmental acoustics group leader.
And you have been involved with the project we've been discussing here today, the Horus Kentucky project that is currently under development in Franklin, Simpson, Kentucky. Can you tell us just a little bit about what you've reviewed or what your expertise is as it relates to this project and the noise study that occurred?
Sure, Randy. We provided a sound level assessment for the construction and operation of the facility. From noise modeling perspective, we looked at the operation and construction. We looked at, certain, pieces of equipment that might be offensive.
Okay. And you have certain documents in front of you today that you can review should this body have specific questions, and those would be the same documents that each of the witnesses today have had available. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you looked at not only noise, but potential noise mitigation. Is that correct?
We looked at no, we didn't really have any noise impacts, so we didn't really look at noise mitigation.
Okay. Chairman, with that, I would turn this witness over to the body for any additional questions.
Mr. Broderick, any questions?
No, thank you, sir.
Ms. Gosnell, any questions for the witness?
Yes, sir. You just indicated that you did not consider any noise mitigation measures. Can you explain what the analysis was on that point?
We looked at, number one, the operational of the facility. We looked at the inverters. We looked at, transformers, things that, hum, make noise, and we did some noise modeling. The results of the operational assessment included that the noise was pretty much contained within the property. There's not enough noise, associated with this project to really cause any concerns. Now, the construction end of it, we looked at certain noise construction pieces of equipment and provided some straight line projections on what, the sound level might be on a worst case scenario. And some of that's based upon the Federal Highway Administration's roadway construction noise model, which isn't the most ideal thing to use for a situation like this, but it's the golden rule, so to speak. It's what we use.
So you did not consider things like using sound blankets on fencing or any sort of trucking arrangements, no noise suppression measures at all?
Not associated with the operation, no, or the construction. Certainly, the construction end of it is, an area where there may be some more issues. Certainly sound blankets associated with some pile driving activities would, when within close proximity to any residential areas, would definitely be advised. But that's just your typical, best operating procedures for the most part.
So you do think that would be feasible and advisable to use that type of mitigation?
Not throughout the entire project, because the project is located relatively far from a lot of residential homes. There are certainly some areas that are a little bit closer, and the pile driving is not something that lasts for days. For the most part, I mean, they can drive a pile within a minute or two and go on to the next spot. So it's not as if you're going to be in a sensitive location for too long, but certainly that's something that can be considered. I know Braden had mentioned that in our discussions in the past, that there were some things that can be done, resilient pads on top of the, piles, so you're not getting a metal on metal bang. Things like that are certainly feasible.
What distance would you recommend in which that would be feasible from where the residents are, the businesses? I mean, you said you didn't think it would recommend. You didn't think it would be recommended for the whole project, and I understood you to say it might possibly be good practice if it was closer. So now I'm just wondering what.
Yeah, I would say pile driving within 500 feet of a residential structure might be a bit obtrusive. And certainly blocking the line of sight, from that piece of equipment would definitely benefit. You would get a significant noise reduction if you block the line of sight towards that direction of the residential home. But there just wasn't a lot of residential homes within that 5 distance. There were several though.
All right, I have a few questions trying to clarify some issues with these responses to our data requests. Initially, there was a response, the first data request, number 23, and the company indicated it would follow Simpson County's building requirements, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday. However, peak activity would occur on Saturdays and Sundays if the county allowed for that. And then in the response to staff's second request, number 4, you indicated you would limit construction from 7 a.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Saturday. So there's a bit of a discrepancy. Can you explain what your proposal is on when the construction activity would occur?
If I may, that question may be better suited to Braden Houston, because I know he had specific conversations with Carter Monday, and that's what caused that change in planning. And that might be beyond the scope of Bill's, because he really is just based on the noise study. But I know Braden could provide information about why that is and the scope, not only on the mitigation that you just asked about, but also as to when they're going to do construction and look out for, the residents in that area.
Mr. Koppel, are you unable to answer those questions?
No, I think that's a better question for Braden for sure.
Yeah,
He's more familiar with scheduling.
Let me clarify what I'm asking, because we for too long we've just let people push off to better for somebody else. But do you have firsthand knowledge to where you're unable to answer that question?
I do not have first-hand knowledge on the the construction schedule. No.
We'll call back Mr. Houston for that purpose, Ms. Gosnell.
All right, then I have nothing further for this witness.
Okay. Mr. Broderick, Mr. Broderick, or excuse me, I've got it here, Mr. Murley, is that correct?
Yes, sir. No questions. Thank you.
All right. Deputy Secretary Lyons, any questions? Okay, I got you. Mr. Rowland, any questions?
No.
Vice Chair Covage?
No questions.
Commissioner Butler?
No questions.
Mr. Koppel, my only questions are, were you aware before today that the applicant had updated their site layout in this matter?
I was aware, yes.
And have you been asked to review that site layout to determine whether it provides any meaningful, differences in noise for any of the 60-plus noise receptors that you studied?
I mean, at this point, I have not analyzed it. I mean, if anything, it's increasing the distance, from the component or from whatever it may be to the residence, because we're increasing the offset there, the boundary there. So, while we didn't do any calculations, it would make the numbers lower.
Okay. Mr. Saunders, do you have any redirect to Mr. Koppel?
I do not, Chairman. And I apologize, I didn't mean to overstep there with the witness. I apologize.
That's okay. We're trying to, it's just a personal preference. Ms. Gosnell, is there any reason that Mr. Koppel can't be excused for the remainder of the hearing?
No, not from our point of view.
All right, thank you for being here today, Mr. Koppel. You may be excused. Mr. Saunders, you have additional witnesses?
We have no other witnesses other than we could make Braden Houston available for those final questions. Otherwise, we would rest.
Okay. We have additional questions from Mr. Houston, correct, Ms. Gosnell?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Houston, please turn on your camera and your microphone. You remain under oath from earlier. Mr. Saunders, do you have any direct that you'd like to conduct in order to narrow any of the questions or answer any of the questions that have been asked to date?
I would appreciate that, Chairman, if you believe that's appropriate.
Go ahead.
With regard to, you heard some testimony regarding mitigation of potential noise, especially during the construction phase. And I know that's something that you've had discussions with Carter Monday. Can you tell this body some of the potential noise mitigation techniques that you've utilized before or that may be appropriate for utilization in this project?
Yes, so to answer that question, in terms of just lowering the decibel level at different receptors, i.e. houses, basically what we can do is we can use noise baffles around the pile, and typically the loudest component of this would be the pile driving. These are relatively small excavating units with pile drivers on them, so they're not large, massive excavators. But basically what would happen is that there, as Mr. Caulfield said, we can put noise baffles around the different pile driving units. We can put up blockers, basically, as he said, once you can block the visual, essentially what you're doing is you're blocking the sound from going through that barrier to the noise receptor, i.e. the house. So there's a lot of different methods that we can use. And ultimately what will happen is we'll be told by the county what they would like us to do in terms of different technologies, different ways to mitigate it. So ultimately, as part of that development plan that we're in negotiations with the county on, that will be one of the conditions that they may say to us, look, we'd like you to do this, we'd like you to do that. But ultimately, they will dictate to us how they would like us to handle that.
Thank you. And then the other issue that came up was kind of the evolution of the time schedule for working. And so originally there was a broader time schedule that's since been condensed. Can you explain how that occurred and what the current plan is for construction?
Yeah, and the reason there was some confusion, and this was kind of an initial initial kind of preliminary discussions with one of the building inspectors, but basically the reason it kind of went back and forth a couple times was because Simpson County actually does not have any time limits on when you can do construction work, which surprised me a little bit. We just had looked at it, we had seen that 7 to 8 seemed to be the right time frame. So basically what we have now in front of us is apparently there is no requirement as to when you can't do construction. So what we're going to do, and as part of the conditional use permit, and what we're basically discussing with the county, is that we would have a self-imposed, or they would write it right into the conditions, a 7 in the morning to 8 at night time limit for construction, with no construction allowed on Sundays. So now, again, if the county would like to even make that more constricted, they're certainly welcome to do it. But apparently there's no requirement But like I said, we want to be good neighbors. We want to be able to, work this so that people can kind of live with it as we're going through the construction cycle. But basically, that's what we're expecting to put in there in a discussion with the planning department to say, why don't we just put something in so that everybody knows when construction can occur and when it can't occur. And if they're comfortable with 7 to 8, basically being reduced from 24 hours a day, which they're going to be, then we would have those parameters written into our conditions with the county, and that would dictate when we can and when we can't do construction. And obviously, in regards to Vice Chairman Coverage's questions from earlier, if there's some kind of issue with a funeral procession or anything like that, different times of day, where there's a specific cause that somebody might like us to stop construction, we could work something into that with the county as well. Certain parameters that people would reach out to us and say, hey, look, we need a couple hours for some privacy. Would it be possible to do something else? So that can be put in there as well, depending on what the county would like to do.
And Chairman, with that, I have no further questions.
Mr. Broderick, do you have any questions for Mr. Houston? Or, I'm sorry, Mr. Murley?
No, sir.
Okay.
I'll take that. No, sir.
All right. Ms. Gosnell, do you have any additional questions?
Yes. Are you indicating that these would be put in as part of the conditional use permit?
Yes, we would basically recommend to the county that they do that, just to put something in there for their own benefit. But yeah, that would be the idea, that the conditional use permit would state specifically our times of construction.
At the present time, are you in agreement that there would not be any construction activities on Sundays?
That's correct. Yeah, we would just take Sunday right off the table.
And what about holidays? Because there was some indication about that as well.
Yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned that. Yeah, so Sundays and federally recognized holidays, we would just take that off,
Are you aware of the various recent rulings of some of the siting boards that direct work between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m.?
I had not been made aware of that, but if that seems to be common practice, I think we could certainly work with something like that, if that was a recommendation that the siting committee would like to pass along to the county. Like I said, as of right now, they have no requirements, so, like I said, we're open to, whatever kind of standard common practice is, but whatever the county tells us to do, that's what we'll do.
I guess then there's really not a reason, a particular uniqueness for this project that would require you to have a variation on that schedule. There's not anything that you can point to.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, right. I mean, we're, standard solar project, pretty standard fare, so.
That's all.
Thank you.
Deputy Secretary Lyons, any questions?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm having network issues, so hopefully I'm coming through.
It's all right. I can hear you. Thank you. Mr. Rowland, any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chair?
No questions.
Commissioner Butler?
No questions.
I think all my questions, Mr. Houston will come through on the post-hearing data request. Mr. Saunders, any redirect to Mr. Houston?
No, Chairman, thank you.
Okay. And based on your previous statement, I take it that the applicant, that's your case today?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Mr. Murley, would you like to call your first witness at this time?
Yes, sir. Thank you. We'll call Steve Baldwin at this time.
Okay, Mr. Baldwin, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Okay. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Steve Baldwin, and my address is 1570 Peden Mill Road, Franklin, Kentucky, 42134.
Okay, Mr. Murley, you may ask.
Mr. Baldwin, you're a resident of Simpson County,
That's correct.
and are you an owner of property that's in close proximity to the proposed site for the solar farm that we're here about?
That's correct.
Where exactly is your property located in proximity to the proposed site?
it adjoins it on one corner, and it's straight across the street on Hendricks Road.
So your property adjoins the property that's the proposed site, is that right?
That's correct.
And how many acres do you own?
It's 153, 154 acres there.
Okay. And what is the use currently of the property that you own?
We raise cattle and hay.
Cattle and hay?
That's correct.
How long has that property been used in that fashion?
Probably for the last 20 years.
Okay. Now you have voiced objections to the solar farm being placed where they're proposing to place it, correct?
That's correct.
And your objections that you've voiced, can you kind of just generally tell this board what your issues are?
Well, I have more than one issue, but a summary of them, like anybody, I mean, I would hate to go over to the farm and being in a farming area, look out and all you could see in 2 or 3 directions is solar panels. That's one thing I'm concerned about, and I know that they will address that in their zoning, but I'm concerned about the water that's going to run off of the property, because we do have water runoff now. When it was in corn, it run off over onto us. And of course, a major concern is my property value. I mean, you know, the property as it was, you know, was probably worth in excess of $10,000 an acre. But with a solar farm there, I mean, if I decided to sell a piece of it all, just like the 25 acres, who's wanting to buy and walk out their door and that's all they see is a solar farm? And
So you believe it will decrease the value of your property?
I absolutely do.
And you're concerned about the visual impact that'll take place as a result of the solar panels being placed where they're going to be placed at?
That's correct.
Have we discussed all of your, and you've in fact appealed the conditional use permit?
We have.
You're a part of that litigation?
That's correct.
And those 2 appeals, there's 2 separate appeals, are still pending, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Mr. Saunders, you have any questions?
I do not, Chairman.
Ms. Gosnell, any questions?
No, sir.
Deputy Secretary Lyons,
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Rowland,
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chair Cubbage,
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Butler.
No questions.
I have just a couple. Mr. Baldwin, good afternoon.
Hello.
So one of the statements you made, I just want to make sure I understand the basis for it. You stated that you think the current land in the area is worth approximately, or in the neighborhood of about $10,000 an acre. Is that correct?
Well, in excess of that, yes, I would say.
Yeah. And so is that based off of recent sales or, you know, offers that you've heard? Just curious about what the you know, sort of basis for that position is.
It's based off, I just purchased a farm probably, 2 miles down the road, and I give in excess of $10,000 an acre for it, and that was last week.
So what is, when you say you're giving it for the farm, what's the nature of the property with a value of approximately or in excess of $10,000? Is it agricultural? Is it row crop? Is it hay? Or is it folks, you know, purchasing it for the purpose of subdividing it? I don't know what the planning and zoning requirements are in Simpson County around subdividing, you know, larger properties. But what's the nature of the property after the purchase of farm or land for that value?
Well, this farm that I just purchased, it was fenced for cattle, but it's very similar to the one that I have. It's, they raise hay on it also because they had, I don't know, probably about 20 acres of it in the hay that they had in the barn. And, you know, these farms, they could, if you wanted to go, and they could be subdivided, I mean, you know, and houses put on. But, I mean, you know, with a solar farm there, couldn't subdivide one. I just don't know who would buy one looking across the street and a solar farm there. Of course, I've had it, like I said, I've had it for a long time, and we haven't subdivided, but it could be done that way. It's basically road frontage all the way around the property I have.
Yeah, so the land that you bought, for instance, you intend on keeping that in agricultural production, whether it's row crop or hay or cattle?
I do.
Okay. And I just want to make sure I wasn't clear from the initial questions Mr. Murley asked. So you are an adjoining landowner with the land that's underlying this project, is that correct?
That's correct.
And how much, just curious, how much sort of fence line are you going to have in connection with that property?
Well, the one actually joins it there is probably 25 acres. But, you know, this is another concern. These roads out here that these farms are on are only, they're less than 20 foot wide, probably closer to 18. And the property that doesn't join it, it's got a road in between it that's 18 foot wide, that you're talking about bringing this construction equipment in on. You can't pass another car out there on these roads without stopping and somebody getting over to the very edge of the road.
And has the applicant in this case met with you to discuss vegetation screening or any other sort of screening for your, between the proposed project and your properties?
He has not.
All right, Mr. Murley, those are all the questions I have. Do you have any redirect, Mr. Baldwin?
I do not. I do not.
All right, thank you, Mr. Baldwin.
Thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Murley, do you have an additional witness?
I have one additional witness,
You may call him.
called John Pitt.
Okay, Mr. Pitt, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Okay, please state your name and address for the record.
John W. Pitt, II, 172 Hendricks Road, Franklin, Kentucky.
Okay, Mr. Murley, you may ask.
Mr. Pitt, you're a resident of Simpson County,
Yes, sir.
and what is your association or interest in the property that Mr. Baldwin just described?
I used to own this whole property, and during business time, I deeded it all over to him in the last 20 years. And I built a house on the property, which is directly across from the Holman property, which is 300 and something acres of the solar farm. The Hendricks farm and road runs totally all the way across the Hoffman property, which faces this. The only thing divides it is Hendricks Road. The cattle is right there, 75 acres of it is in cattle. Other 75.3 acres or so is in pasture, in hay and woods. The Hendricks Road is 12 feet wide. The road that Mr. Baldwin talked about, which is Tyree Chapel, actually measures out 16 foot wide. It's just enough room for one automobile to get through. The other one has to get pulled over to get by it in a truck.
So the Hendricks Road property that Mr. Baldwin was discussing, that he has that's adjoining this property where the site is.
It is.
Now, do you farm this land
I do.
and you live close to there?
I live right on it.
Okay, how far is your house from where the site will be?
To the very back of it, the road driveway to the Hoffman property across the road on Hendricks is 1,300 feet.
Okay, so as the crow flies from your house to where this site is proposed to go in, how far is that?
1,300 feet.
Okay. Now, Mr. Baldwin, you had the benefit of hearing some of his concerns that he's raised. Think about visual impact and so forth. Do you have that same concern about the solar farm?
Totally.
Okay.
The visual and anybody around there, it's all row crop, agricultural ground. There's hardly any property around there that's got houses on it, not unless it's just one per farm. Everything around the whole property, which is Tracy owns 200 acres that joins this farm, and I don't know who else owns it. The church is up there on the other end of Tyree Chapel. The biggest problem with all of it is nobody's picked up the concern of the water runoff. The Hoffman property, which is right in front of my driveway, I see it all the time. It's been in row crop for going on 30 years. It floods, and it's got 2 or 3 sinkholes on it in that part of the where I'm talking about, in front of the 172 Hendricks Road. It floods because water runs from both sides, from the land that Steve's got, plus all the water comes off Tracy's property and the Hoffman property. Row crop is still, it will flood. The Summers property, water runs down on the 25 acres, which is on Tyree Chapel Road, which all of this farm, the 153 acre faces Hendricks Road, Tyree Chapel Road, all the way around it. Every bit of it's got road frontage. If you, as a crow, now, I guess you'd say it's probably a mile of it, road frontage on the 155 acres.
Now, do you, so you talked about the visual impact and the water runoff.
Correct.
You're also in close proximity property owner, correct?
That's correct.
And so are you concerned with a possible effect on your property value?
Yes, I buy land and have bought land, sold land, bought some here lately. And land up there, the value of that land, I deal with a guy named Jeff Britt, which is a real estate person in Simpson County. All of the good agricultural ground in that part of the country is bringing anywhere low 8,500s up to $12,000 an acre.
And you think this is going to have a detrimental value on that?
Well, the only thing you could do is do what he's doing is cattle. If he wanted to develop it any more than what it is right now, you couldn't sell an acre off of it for $30,000 with a solar farm around it.
Now, living as close as you do to this proposed site, working there, do you have concerns about the increase in traffic or noise?
It's mostly noise and just looking at it. I don't know what these I've been around solar panel farm, I call it a solar community, which is up towards Knoxville, Tennessee, and it is terrible.
How about the construction that's going to take place?
When it's going in, it's terrible, and then they left this one and going to Knoxville. It's up in Crossville, Tennessee, to be exactly. It's grown up and got grass, weeds. Nobody really takes care of it. They don't have full-time employees, just as they said. Anybody can go look at it and see.
Has anybody associated with this project sat down with you and asked you about your concerns?
Never asked me nothing.
Okay. Now, you're also a party to the litigation that's going on in the Simpson Circuit Court, the Kentucky Court of Appeals.
Correct, I am.
And those are still pending.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Mr. Saunders, any questions?
Sorry about that. I do have a few questions. Mr. Pitt, you heard the testimony of Mr. Baldwin, and I believe you just testified that nobody involved with this project is set down. Do you recall an attempt to have discussions with them that you told the folks from Horus One to talk to your lawyer?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so actually they did try to talk to you and you told them to talk to your lawyer, correct?
And when we was in, the first time I'd ever come up was when we was in the planning and zoning meeting, never before.
Okay. And so, and currently you are involved in litigation, and so communications would go through your counsel, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Do I understand correctly that you had previously owned some of the land that
Yes, sir.
the solar development is going to be on?
What do you say now?
Ask him to repeat it if you.
Repeat it if you don't mind.
Yeah, did you previously own a portion of the land that the solar development is currently planned to be on?
No, sir.
You did not?
No, sir.
It was not property that was deeded to your wife?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Ms. Gosnell, any questions?
No, sir.
Deputy Secretary Lyons, any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Rowland,
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chair Cubbage?
I do have just a couple of questions. I want to make sure I understand Mr. Pitt's testimony. Good afternoon, Mr. Pitt.
Good afternoon.
You were talking about property values and per acre values, and we've been talking about an average per acre value of about $10,000 an acre. Am I characterizing that right?
You're correct.
Okay, and that's for the current uses of the property in the general vicinity?
Yes, ma'am. It's agricultural, row crop, soybeans, wheat, corn,
Okay. Livestock?
livestock. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Tobacco.
And you mentioned, though, a possibility of selling off smaller parts for residential development at, I think you'd said, 30,000 an acre?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that happening in this area?
I had sold some to my father for that same place.
And did you have any current plans to subdivide for residential use?
No, ma'am.
Okay, that's the only questions I have. Thank you so much, sir, and thank you both for being here.
Thank you, ma'am.
Commissioner Butler, any questions?
No, the vice chair asked mine. Thank you.
I don't have any. Mr. Murley, do you have any redirect of the witnesses?
No, sir, thank you.
Okay. Do you have any additional witnesses today?
Those are our two witnesses today.
Okay. So, Mr. Murley, Mr. Saunders, I think that's it. That's all we have for the evidentiary hearing today. We will, we'll do a couple things here in a minute. One, we're going to determine when we can ask those post-hearing data requests and then set a time in which those are responded to.
Thank you.
The regulations, I'll just point everyone out to them. The regulations in 807 KAR 5110, which are the regulations related to board proceedings for this board, allow for parties to file a legal brief no later, or a brief no later than 7 days after the conclusion of an evidentiary hearing. Now, it's expected here in a second when we set up the dates in which post-hearing data requests are sought by the board and in order for them to be responded. Technically, evidence won't be closed, but I don't necessarily think that any of the things that we asked today should have a material impact on any of the parties' ability to brief the case if you should choose to do so. So there's no requirement to file a brief. I just wanted to direct everyone's attention to that regulation and that it allows you to file a brief no later than 7 days after the conclusion of an evidentiary hearing. And that's section 7 of that regulation. Ms. Gosnell, when do we think that we can have the post-hearing data requests drafted and ready to be filed?
The 17th?
Okay, so we can have those by close of business on Wednesday. I don't think we have any for you, Mr. Murley, so it'd just be Mr. Saunders. How long, given that you've heard effectively all the questions that will be asked, how long will you and your client need in order to respond to those data requests?
Jordan, the only thing I would request, and this is a personal request, and it's only so that I don't get in trouble with my wife. We have a Disney vacation planned for December 1st, and we have 4 children, and so, yeah, it's probably a little unorthodox to ask this, but I don't know traditionally how long you guys would, if it's before that point, that's fine. We will be back that following Monday, that we could, and I've got associates here that could help too. So whatever timing you feel is appropriate, but I will be out the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and then that following Monday. Otherwise, we can, anytime.
So it's my understanding that a final order in this case has to be entered by January 1st. That's the,
Yes, sir.
I think, 180 days since we had a hearing in this case.
Could we suggest November 30 for them?
Yeah, how about, that's a Tuesday, correct, Ms. Gosnell? Tuesday,
Yes.
Tuesday, November the 30th. Is that adequate time for you to respond to those data requests? I think that's 13 days.
Yes, I believe so. And like you said, we know as of today what most of the information that's going to be sought. So yes,
Okay.
I believe that's fair.
Okay. All right, so we will have those entered before close of business tomorrow, Mr. Saunders. We'll also have an order going out, probably reminding the parties of that regulation that provides an opportunity to file briefs within 7 days of the close of the evidentiary hearing. We'll also set the date in which these data requests have to be filed, which is November the 30th. Is there anything else, Mr. Merlin, Mr. Saunders, that we need to take up before we adjourn today?
I have nothing further. I just appreciate the time and thank you, everybody, today.
Just a point of clarification, ours would be due Wednesday, not tomorrow, correct?
That's right, sorry.
Okay,
Close the
that's
business
all,
on
that's all.
Wednesday.
All right,
Yeah. And the order is setting those as well.
yes.
Okay. All right, hearing nothing else, we'll adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.